In the International Conference on Stopping Dumping of Fukushima Nuclear Wastewater. Good afternoon. I am Kang Sun-eung, representative, and I am with the Democratic Party of Korea, and I am the spokesperson of the Democratic Party of Korea. I am the MC of the pre-event of this international conference. I will first introduce the participants of this international conference, and they will listen to the message from Mr. Lee Jae-myung, the chair of the party, and then we will listen to Mr. Woo Won-sik and Mr. Kim Jun-hyung for the opening remarks, and then we will have the second part of the international conference. So we'll listen to the stance of the Democratic Party of Korea, and we will share the cases of the U.S., China, and Japan, and we will have a general discussion, and we will issue joint resolution. Before we start the international conference, I would like to ask for your kind understanding of the panelists. According to the procedure of the official event of Korea, we will conduct the summary ceremony of Pledge of Allegiance. Please understand. So let's begin the Pledge of Allegiance. Those in the hall, please stand up and face the national flag of Republic of Korea. Please look at the national flag in the back of the hall. At ease. We will skip the rest part of the procedure. Please be seated. Next, I would like to introduce the participants of this international conference. First of all, Representative Lee Jae-myung, Chair of Democratic Party of Korea. Mr. Kim Jun-hyung, the Chair of the East Asia Peace and Cooperation Special Committee. Representative Woo Won-sik, Chair of the Fukushima Wastewater Ocean Dumping Countermeasure Committee. Next, I would like to introduce the moderator and the panelists of this international conference. Today's international conference will be moderated by Professor Nam Gi-jung, the Director of Institute of Japanese Studies of Seoul National University. And we have Representative Lee Yong-sun, the Chair of International Cooperation of the Countermeasure Committee, and who is also the coordinator of the Foreign Affairs and Unification Committee. Next, we have Mr. Joseph Bergson, the chair of WPSR Nuclear Weapons Task Force Team, who is joining us online. And then Mr. Choi Gang-chul, the chair of Korea American Public Action Committee, who is joining us virtually. Next, Professor Chang Moo-hui of the Academy of East Asian Studies of Sungkyunkwan University. He's also joining us online. And we have Mr. Masukubo Hajime, the head of the Citizens Nuclear Information Center.
Now let us introduce you the participants from the two committees, Fukushima Wastewater Ocean Dumping Countermeasure Committee and the Northeast Asia Peace and Cooperation Special Committee. First, from the Countermeasure Committee. First, lawmaker Mr. Wee Sung-kwon, who is the chair of Countermeasure Committee. Thank you very much. And lawmaker Yang Lee-won-young, the vice chair of the committee. And lawmaker Lee Soo-jin, the director of Solidarity Project Unit. And the lawyer, Mr. Song Gi-ho, the policy director.
김홍걸 의원님.
and lawmaker Mr. Kim Hong-gol from the Democratic Party of Korea.
죄송한데 잘 안 보여서 그러는데요. 다음은 동북아.
And next, we also have the participants from the Northeast Asia Peace and Cooperation Special Committee.
네네. 네, 알겠습니다. 동북아 평화협력특위 수석 부위원장 맡고 계신
The chair of the committee,
계시고요.
okay, Mr. Kim Byung-gil, lawmaker, is on his way.
보고 계시고요. 네.
And Vice Chair Moon Jung-yeol, he is on his way. And Vice Chair Yoon Eun-ju,
왕선택 부위원장님.
Vice Chair Wang Sun-taek,
이선호 부위원장님 참석해 주셨습니다.
Vice Chair Lee Sun-ho,
이지원 부위원장님.
Vice Chair Lee Ji-won,
박성수 부위원장님.
Vice Chair Park Sung-soo,
조현안 부위원장님.
Vice Chair Jo Hyun-hwan,
그리고 지금 도착하신 이다은 부위원장님.
and Vice Chair Lee Da-hun, who has just arrived. Thank you very much.
네, 그리고 김광성 부위원장님.
And Vice Chair Kim Kwang-sung.
바쁘신 와중에 참석.
Thank you very much for joining this conference despite your busy schedule. Now, let me invite the chairperson of the Democratic Party of Korea, Ms. Lee Jae-myung, for his opening remarks. Now, simultaneous interpretation will be provided.
국제공동회의 참석자 여러분,
All attendees of the International Conference against the Fukushima nuclear wastewater dumping,
위협에 처했습니다.
the ocean we have coexisted with and the well-being and safety of the world's citizens are at risk.
강렬하게 반대하는데도
Despite the strong opposition from neighboring countries and even their own citizens, the Japanese government has taken an unprecedented step in human history by releasing nuclear contaminated water into the sea. As the largest political party in the National Assembly, the Democratic Party of Korea has dedicated itself to safeguarding the lives and safety of the people of Republic of Korea and championing global peace.
그런데 안타깝게도
Regrettably, the ruling party has in fact supported Japan's decision to release nuclear contaminated water.
저는 대한민국 제1야당
As the chairperson of the main opposition party in Korea, I consistently voice our firm opposition,
표명합니다.
echoing the will of our people.
민주당은 17일에 이어 31일에도
On the 31st, following our initial complaint on 17th, the Democratic Party submitted a second public complaint to the UN Human Rights Council.
유엔 인권이사회에 접수했습니다. 어제는 기자회견을 열어 일본 핵 오염수
Yesterday, we conducted a press conference to emphasize that Japan's discharge of nuclear contaminated water constitutes a clear violation of the London Convention.
힘을 해양투기에
30 years ago, Japan led the opposition against Russian radioactive waste dumping in the ocean, eventually resulting in a ban. However, Japan is now releasing nuclear contaminated water, which is perceived by many as a deception against the entire world and an irreversible sin.
우리 국민들은 2주째
Our people have been participating in weekend rallies for the past 2 weeks, protesting against both the Japanese and Korean governments.
일본은 핵 오염수 해양투기를
Japan should immediately cease discharging nuclear contaminated water,
일본을
and our government should consider pursuing legal action against Japan through the International Maritime Tribunal.
오염수 방류를 공호해놓고 정작
The U.S. is advocating for the discharge of contaminated water, but it was the U.S. that reduced the import of Japanese agricultural and marine products the most as of last June, compared to the same period the previous year.
전면 금지를
China and Hong Kong, the largest importers of Japanese seafood, have completely banned the import of Japanese seafood.
모두의 바다를
When the international community comes together, we can protect the ocean for all of
일본이
us.
주장하는 대로만 해도
Just as Japan claims,
무려
it is
37만 톤을
1.37 million tons over 30 years.
예정보다 훨씬 더 늘어날 가능성이 높기 때문에
However, this number could increase significantly in the future, so taking action to halt it now would be a substantial achievement.
있을 것입니다. 저는 확신합니다.
I'm convinced
30년이 될지 100년이 될지
it could be 30 years or 100 years or 300 years.
이 야만적인 핵 오염수 해양 투기는 결국
Dumping of wastewater
어느 시점에선가 중단될 수밖에 없을
should be
것입니다.
stopped
해양
at a
투기가
point in the future. If the dumping continues,
누적될 것이고
the wastewater accumulates in the ocean, and 10 years or 20 years from now,
이 행위가 얼마나 야만적인
global
행위인지를
citizens
인식하게 될 것입니다.
will start to recognize this barbarian act of Japan.
자신들이 만든 인류의 유해한 핵 쓰레기를
So, nuclear wastewater
어디 아깝다는 이유로
should be
국내에서 처리하지 않고 세계인의
processed
바다에 내다 버린 것에 대해
inside Japan. They should not dump
세계인의 비난을
those
더 이상
wastewater
감당할 수 없는 상황에
into the
처하게
ocean.
될 것입니다. 그런 상황이 오기 전에
So,
일본 정부와
before we have
일본 국민들께서
such a future,
입장을 바꿔
the Japanese government and the Japanese people
해양
should
투기를
change their
즉각 중단해
tone
주시기
and
바랍니다.
course.
우리 모두가
They should stop
함께 힘을
dumping
합친다면
the wastewater into the ocean.
이러한 무도한
So, let us unite our efforts to put an end to the dumping of contaminated water.
환영하고 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Lee Jae-myung, Chairperson of the Democratic Party. Now, let me invite Mr. Woo Won-sik.
공동회의에 참석하신 여러분 환영합니다.
I truly welcome you all to this international conference.
해양투기 총괄대책.
I am Woo Won-sik, the standing chairman of the Democratic Party of Korea's Fukushima Wastewater Ocean Dumping Countermeasure Committee. Despite opposition and concerns from around the world, it has already been more than a week since the discharge of the contaminated water began. Currently,
최소 30년
not only Korea, Japan's closest neighbor, but also many surrounding countries are deeply apprehensive amid worries that 460 tons or more of wastewater per day may continue to be dumped for at least 30 years. In particular, diluted and filtered treated contaminated water does not eliminate radioactive substances such as nuclides, making the act of dumping contaminated water increasingly dangerous over time due to the principle of time and accumulation. This is not a problem that can be resolved by temporary ignorance. Therefore, the international community must unite and raise a collective voice against Japan's disposal of contaminated water. If people from various countries come together today and pool their wisdom and strength, we can find a solution to halt the discharge of the wastewater. Experts from Korea, the US, China, and Japan have gathered with a shared concern about how to address the issue of Fukushima's contaminated water dumping. We'd like to express our deepest gratitude to everyone who has taken time out of your busy schedule to join us. Through today's international conference, we are going to share key responses from each country and seek ways for international cooperation. Our aim is to foster a broader movement of international solidarity by developing joint measures for the future. Specifically, we aspire to initiate a campaign in collaboration with the responses to the London Protocol, London Convention General Assembly, and the UN Human Rights Child Society Complaint. We welcome your valuable opinions and encourage active discussions on this matter. The Democratic Party of Korea, currently the largest party in South Korea, has condemned the Yoon Suk-yeol government and the ruling party for aiding and abetting the dumping of wastewater and stepped forward to directly persuade the international community. The London Protocol and the London Convention strictly prohibit ocean dumping of nuclear materials. This issue is scheduled to be addressed at the upcoming Conference of the Parties to the London Protocol in October. However, the current Yoon Suk-yeol administration ignores this important matter. So I firmly believe that international public opinion can be swayed by how effectively we convey the Republic of Korea's concerns to the international community. Accordingly, Mr. Lee Jae-myung, chairperson of the Democratic Party of Korea, has sent personal letters to the political leaders of each country seeking cooperation from the 88 parties to the London Convention, despite the ongoing hunger strike. Leading up to the Conference of the Parties, party leader Lee Jae-myung, along with all Democratic Party members of the National Assembly, plans to utilize democratic groups within the National Assembly to conduct parliamentary diplomacy. They will emphasize the illegality of dumping contaminated water from nuclear power plants, focusing on engaging with the national parliaments of countries that have signed the London Convention and Protocol, adopting the mindset that each individual serves as a diplomatic envoy. In this manner, by fostering a strong sense of solidarity within the international community, we can put an end to the dumping of wastewater. Let us raise our voices in collective opposition to ensure that the international community is well informed about the problem. By listening to the insights of international experts gathered here today, we can seek a meaningful response. I hope that today is not our last, but rather a powerful first day of crafting a common response. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next, we would like to invite the chair of Mr. Kim Jun-young. Good afternoon. I am a professor of international and regional studies at Handong University, and I am the chair of Democratic Party's Northeast Asia Peace and Cooperation Special Committee, and I am pleased to welcome you. The Democratic Party's East Asia Peace and Cooperation Special Committee is hosting this event. I would like to sincerely welcome to this international conference, and I sincerely welcome to the chair of the Democratic Party of Korea, Representative Lee Jae-myung. Despite opposition from neighboring countries and even the Japanese people, the Japanese government pushed ahead with dumping contaminated water into the sea. Because of this, the oceans of all mankind are at risk of being polluted, and the safety of citizens around the world is threatened. Together with all of you who are participating in this conference, we once again express our strong regret and urge an immediate halt. The Korean government puts the safety of its people on the back burner, and instead of making effort to prevent the discharge of contaminated water, it has become an accomplice of the Japanese government. That is what is the current administration is doing, unlike the response from the Chinese and Hong Kong governments. And rather, the Yoon administration is saying that what we are doing as a fear-mongering story is spreading. The dumping of Fukushima nuclear wastewater is not just Korea's problem. It is a problem that the whole world must work together to solve. In this sense, today we would like to invite renowned experts from around the countries that are relevant to this issue, who have both conscience and expertise to discuss this effort. The essence of this international conference is not political, anti-government, or anti-Japanese. And I'd like to thank for all the panelists. In particular, my special thanks goes to the Mr. Masukumo Hajime, who is here with us. We will do our best to find the best solution. When everyone joins together around the world, we can save our ocean. Although the contaminated water is being released, we cannot stop our effort to suspend and halt it. In order to stop dumping the nuclear wastewater in the ocean earlier, we are here. So I want to thank again the panelists who are joining us in this conference. So we hope that we share our understanding around the different countries and find a valid alternatives to solve the issue. Today's conference is just the start. We will make effort to join the helping hands around the world to solve this very serious issue. Thank you very much. Next, we'll have a group photo session. Those who are here with us, please come up to the front of the hall. Please come to the front side of this hall for group photo. Thank you very much for your cooperation. Now we will set up the meeting room before we start the international conference. This is so far that you have the access to this international conference. Those who are here for the broadcasting, please understand. Before we start the international conference, I'd like to make a housekeeping announcement. Today's international conference is simultaneously interpreted for better communication between panelists who are joining us from different countries. Please use the interpretation receiver for listening to interpretation. Channel 1 for Korean, Channel 2 for English, and Channel 3 for Japanese. The second part of this program will be moderated by Professor Nam Gi-jung, the Director of Institute of Japanese Studies from Seoul National University. I don't think this conference should necessarily be private. So if any reporters want to join this conference, we may allow them to join the conference. Please let the journalists and reporters know that we allow them to join this international conference. Please open the door so that they can come inside. So you can report and you can listen to what is being said at this international conference. As soon as people take their seats, we will start at the second part of the program. Are there the receivers for interpretation? Do we have more of these interpretation receivers? The receivers are outside the hall. The journalists, you can use them to listen to interpretations. When you leave this international conference, please leave the receivers at the desk where they are regionally on. The channel 1 for Korean, and channel 2 for English, and channel 3 for Japanese. You can set the channel for listening to the language that you want to listen to. The participants and journalists, are you ready for the international conference? Are we all set? Yes, if we are ready, I think we can get it started.
From now on, we are going to begin the international conference for stopping the dumping of Fukushima wastewater. I'm Nam Gi-jung, professor at Seoul National University. Today, we provide simultaneous interpretation. Korean, English, and Japanese are available. You may use a translation receiver and set your language. August 21st, the Japanese government at 1 p.m. The Japanese government initiated the dumping of wastewater into the ocean. But many raised some concerns over the safety of the wastewater. And there are many concerns and speculations over the safety of the wastewater nationwide and worldwide. So many people think that whether it is the only ultimate solution we have, we may have other alternatives rather than dumping the wastewater into the ocean. We should take responsibilities for our generation and for our next generation. So I think that is why we have gathered here. Feel responsibilities. We need to gather our voices and opinions against the dumping of wastewater into the ocean. So that's why we have invited experts from different countries to more deeply discuss this matter. In that sense, I'd like to extend my gratitude to the officials of the Democratic Party of Korea for hosting this conference. And despite we not have enough time to prepare this conference, we have distinguished participants from different countries. Thank you very much. And Mr. Boxon, okay, he's with us despite the time difference. Thank you very much.
아까 말씀드린 대로 오염수에 대해서는
Regarding wastewater,
검증되지 않았다는 점이
the
확인되었습니다.
wastewater has not been fully verified. The safety of the wastewater has not been fully verified.
그렇기 때문에 방류밖에
Scientists and almost everyone agree
여러 대안들이 이미
with this point. So, discharge of the wastewater is the only option we have.
라고 하는 생각들을
We think that we need to request stopping of the dumping of the wastewater into the ocean and think of other alternative solution. So, in this conference, we are going to figure out current status quo, and
실천할 수 있는 방법
possible other solutions and how we can
세 가지를 가지고
put those solutions into practice.
드리자면은
So, 3 points. First, once again,
여러 국가들 속에서
we have panelists from different countries. So, these experts are going to share their views on the current status and the possible solutions.
각각의
And
국내에서 또는
since the discharge of the
중에서
wastewater into the ocean,
문제를 어떻게 다뤄야 한다고 생각하는지
many have raised their concerns and views how we should make an approach regarding this matter,
시민들의 국제 협력을 끌어낼 수 있는
how we can
구체적인
induce cooperation
그것을 말씀을 해주시면
among the different civic groups worldwide. If you have more specific ideas and comments, we are going to gather your ideas and then summarize it. And your ideas
패널들께는
will reflect to the final statement of
적이 있습니다.
our side.
넣어주시면 고맙겠고
So you may
나오는 얘기들을
freely raise your views,
때문에 대명할 수 있도록 저희들은 노력을 하겠습니다.
and we'll do our best to reflect your ideas to our statement.
소개는 있었기 때문에 제가 여기에서 다시 패널리스트를 소개할 시간은 없는
Because those panelists have already been introduced, I'm not going to introduce each panelist once again. Each panelist will be given 8 to 10 minutes,
8분 정도
about 8 minutes.
생각을 정리해서 말씀을 해주시고
So you may utilize the 8 minutes to
시간을 가지고
introduce your views,
얘기들을 가지고
and then
있는 시간을 좀 만들고
later we will have sufficient discussion time.
자료들을 보니 대략 8분 안에 가능할 것 같다는 생각을 합니다.
I think you will be able to finalize your presentation within 8 minutes. First speaker will be Mr. Lee Yong-sun, and next speaker will be Mr. Matsukubo Hajime,
공동의장님,
and then Mr. Joseph Boxon, and Mr. Choi Gang-chul,
중국 측의
and
장무희 교수님
last but not least, Mr. Chang Moo-hee.
모시도록 하겠습니다.
This will be the sequence of the speakers. First, let me invite Mr. Lee Yong-sun.
Hello, I am Lee Yong-sun. I am the member of the National Assembly, and I am the head of the international collaboration of the Countermeasure Committee, and I am also the member of the Foreign Affairs and Unification Committee. And I'd like to thank Representative Kim Jun-hyung of the Special Committee, and I also thank Professor Nam Gi-jung, and I also thank the panelists from the Japan and the US and China to discuss these very sensitive issues. From the August 21st, the Fukushima nuclear power plants released the contaminated water, and the problem of that issue would be well understood by you all. The sea is all shared by humanity, so the dumping of the nuclear wastes radioactive water is not just the problem of Korea, but the problem of the world that we all need to find a solution. So I am very glad to have this international conference to discuss international solidarity to stop the ocean dumping of contaminated water. I hope that today's discussion will share each country's situation and awareness of the problem while working together through solidarity to find a clue to stop Japan's dumping of contaminated water into the ocean. Let me first talk about the situation in Korea. So the public's opinion to the discharge of contaminated water exceeds 80%. And many Koreans are anxious about this. And this clearly shows what the public think. And this perception is not related to the political inclination. Among recent public opinion polls, 61.3% of Korean citizens who support the government and the ruling party opposed the discharge of contaminated water. As Japan's release of radioactive water continues despite the opposition of the Korean people, the impact on Korea's fishing and seafood industry is gradually becoming more visible. Although it has not been officially announced in the statistical term, the fishing industry is complaining of difficulties due to the decrease in sales, and there is even talk in the field that sales have dropped by half since the discharge. Despite clear public opinion and the damage that is gradually becoming a reality, the Korean government is triggering public anger by reiterating the Japanese government's position on discharge of contaminated water. The Korean government expressed its position that the contaminated water from nuclear power plants was safe and focused on persuading its citizens rather than responding to the Japanese government. After the discharge, they announced that the Korean experts would be stationed in Fukushima to continuously monitor the situation and safety, but then quietly changed their words to say that they would visit and inspect regularly once every 2 weeks. And now they irresponsibly announced that even these are not regular visits and inspections. After discharge, it has been criticized for being helpless and irresponsible and unable to ensure minimum safety verification. To correct this, the 4 major opposition parties in the National Assembly of the Republic of Korea, including Democratic Party of Korea and civil society, have made efforts to convey the will of the people to the Korean government and international community. A nationwide signature campaign began last May, collecting 1.87 million signatures and urging the president's office on August 18th to take an active role in preventing the release of contaminated water. A signature campaign was also held to receive a special complaint from the UN Committee on Human Rights. The special complaint to the UN Human Rights Committee on Human Rights, in which approximately 480,000 people participated, were submitted to the UN Human Rights Council in 2 installments on August 17th and 31st. After the discharge began, the public anger spread and large-scale rallies are being held on August 26th, for example, and September 2nd, with 50,000 people in attendance. The Democratic Party of Korea held several rallies, and a lot of large protests are being held. And our party is holding several rallies urging the government and ruling party to change their positions in the presidential office and the National Assembly. And even as the meeting is underway, a sit-in protest is underway in front of the National Assembly, led by the party representatives and our countermeasure committee members. In addition, protests against the ocean dumping of Fukushima nuclear wastewater are continuously being held in various units in different regions. These large-scale and small-scale gatherings are expected to continue in the future. As explained above, the Democratic Party of Korea clearly opposed the ocean dumping of Fukushima wastewater. It is assessed that ocean dumping of wastewater should be stopped immediately as it poses a serious threat to human health and the marine environment. And we are making a lot of effort to persuade the countries of parties to international agreement, and will also hold the rally. the voices of the public who are in a position against the dumping are being delivered, and we are making effort by taking joint action. Now I would like to talk about our stance as the Democratic Party of Korea. We explicitly oppose the ocean dumping of nuclear wastewater. It has grave threats on the human health and the marine life. And that, based on our principle, we filed a motion to the UN Committee on Human Rights and the London Protocol General Assembly and the London Agreement General Assembly, which will be held from October the 2nd to the 6th, will be the venue that we will file a motion about the nuclear waste water dumping related issues. And we have already filed a motion to a different settings, and this includes the very significant content which will be discussed in various venues. So the Democratic Party of Korea is focusing on the London Convention Protocol General Assembly scheduled for October, believing it will be an important watershed in responding to ocean dumping of nuclear power plant contaminated water. In order to be effective in accordance with the contents of the future general meeting, a request for arbitration procedures at the government level must be followed. However, the authority to bring this up lies with the government, so the role of the government that has signed up to the London Convention is necessary. We are actively informing governments of each country about the problems of ocean dumping of Fukushima wastewater and sharing awareness while seeking communication solidarity measures with the political circles of various parties to urge a response and action at the upcoming London Convention and Protocol General Assembly. As mentioned at the beginning, the ocean is shared by all the humanity. This is a task we all need to work together in order to stop the ocean dumping of the wastewater into the ocean. So you who are joining this conference should act together and work together and making great effort. We are sharing the conditions and status and stance toward this issue in different countries. So beyond the sharing just the situations, we want to find a solution to this. The Democratic Party of Korea is making great effort in order to have a fruit. I hope that you could provide us good advice and help going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. He mentioned about the responses of Korean society, and other types of campaigns and movements waged by the Democratic Party of Korea. And he emphasized the importance of international solidarity on this matter. Thank you very much for your comment. And next, I'd like to invite Mr. Matsukubo Hajime. He is the Secretary General of Japan Nuclear Energy Data Information Office. Please start. I am Matsukubo Hajime. I am Secretary General of Japan Nuclear Energy Data Information Office. Now, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, thank you very much once again for inviting me. Now, let me share our current status in Japan regarding this matter. About 2 to 3 years ago, yesterday on January of 2021, we conducted a survey on this matter, and you can see most of the people, a larger number of people were opposed. So, however, the situation was changed like this because the many public, the government explained that they do not have other option rather than discharging the wastewater into the ocean. That is why there was a change in the opinions of the general public. And the government also explained that there will be no hazard on the health of the people, Japanese people, because they will discharge only limited amount of the nuclide into the ocean, following the strict criteria. And as you can see in the slide, the number from the Japan Fukushima Daiichi MPS is below 22 TABQ. That is why general public, they changed their opinion regarding the ocean dumping. However, still there are some concerns that out of the waste from the Fukushima power plant, we may have other types of radioactive materials. 22 becquerel or less. You can, from the slide, you can see that it is 22 becquerel or less from the Fukushima power plant. Tritium from China, 90 becquerel. And from another MPP, about 143 becquerel. And from Korea, about 71 becquerel. So from this picture, it appears that only small, tiny amount of tritium is being discharged from Fukushima power plant. This is seawater concentration trend. Now, the regular investigations are performed to take this data. You can see the amount of the radioactive material has not been reduced. This is the data with the CS cesium-137. We have a dedicated port near the Fukushima power plant. If there is no radioactive material discharged from the plant, if the concentration is below the criteria, there will be no problem, but that is not the case. We still have a high concentration. We still have some wastewater with a high concentration of radioactive materials. So which means that the radioactive materials are leaking from somewhere. This data is from TEPCO. Yes, some complicated terms are used in this data. In the case of Fukushima power plant, the seawall is installed to prevent the underground water from flowing directly into the ocean. This is seawall, but seawall is not a perfect instrument. A certain amount of underground water leaks through the seawall. So you can check the data over here from this TEPCO data per day. About 30 tons of water, wastewater, flow into this way. Underground water is highly contaminated with a high concentration. So that is why we think that is why we still have a high level of radioactivity over here. So underground water is highly contaminated, and the contaminated water leaks out of the seawall. The wastewater were not treated by ALPS. So we calculated how much of the wastewater, untreated water, contaminated water from without any ALPS treatment leaks out of the seawall. cesium-137 about 7.2 million becquerel. This amount of cesium-137 comes out of the seawater into the ocean. Tritium, yes, this way, flows into the ocean. So, contaminated water is being discharged directly into the ocean. About 7 billion or 9.6 billion becquerels of cesium-137 is being discharged directly into the ocean. In the case of wastewater after the ARPS treatment, 4 million becquerels of cesium-137 was discharged, and tritium, more than 1 trillion becquerels of tritium was discharged. It is way over the criteria. Japanese government and the TEPCO explains that the only limited amount is being discharged under the criteria. However, you can see a huge amount of the radioactive materials are being discharged into the ocean like this. So, ARPS-treated wastewater, yes, is being released from even at the moment through underground water. That's the problem. I'm not talking about ARPS-treated wastewater, but much higher concentration water. I mean, the underground water with much higher concentration is being discharged into the ocean. So this is the point we need to correct. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We were able to listen to what is being said in Japan. The tritium and the tritium level have been talked about, and the persuasion of the people in Japan has been conducted by Japanese government.
If we will look at the data from the TEPCO, okay, we can find the problems over here by just looking at the slide. But the government is only talking about the tritium. The tritium under the level of criteria will be discharged like this way. But we need to look at the data, actual data. So the problem is that how we can manage this large amount of the large becquerels of the radioactive materials into the ocean. So, and I think he will later in the discussion time mention about the movement by the civic groups in Japan against this matter.
Next, I would like to invite Mr. Joseph Buxton, the co-chair of WPSR Nuclear Weapon Task Force, and he will talk about the current situation there and the measure. Please go ahead. The floor is yours, Mr. Buxton.
Hi, I am Dr. Joe Berkson, and after a career in family medicine, I volunteer with Washington Physicians for Social Responsibility. WPSR is an advocacy organization, so we support solutions to existential problems that medicine cannot treat, such as the problems of the climate crisis, the threat of the use of nuclear weapons, and economic inequality. We believe that we must prevent what we can't cure as doctors. So we call on our government to change policies to address these issues. We also educate the public in these areas. For nuclear weapons advocacy, we lobby our members of Congress. In addition to meeting members of Congress and their staff directly, we also work with other organizations who believe in nuclear disarmament and the cleanup of radioactive nuclear waste in our state. That organization is called Washington Against Nuclear Weapons Coalition. And there are 58 member organizations in healthcare, environmental advocacy, faith, labor groups, peace groups, and civic groups. In addition, we have a mobilizing partner, Washington Poor People's Campaign, and even 5 other supporting groups. So this coalition does actions around the state of Washington to inform the public on these issues and enlist them to meet with their own members of Congress, having us attend with them to influence nuclear weapons policies. To the problem at hand, the release of 12 years of stored radioactive cooling water from the Fukushima power plant is a terrible idea. We do not know what will be the effects on human health or the environment. There have never been long-term studies on the effects to marine life or human life of such an undertaking. These studies have not been done because they would need to be carried out over decades. In the past, there have been several incidents of accidental release of radioactive materials on land and in the ocean. For example, the Russians in the Arctic, the British in the Irish Sea, and the French in the English Channel, and more. But none of these were studied for their effects on marine life or humans. The release of over 1.3 million tons of radioactive water into the Pacific Ocean continuously over 30 years is unprecedented. So we cannot know what the downstream effects on marine life and humans really are. Published data by the Japanese government after the Fukushima disaster showed distributions of many heavy radioactive isotopes like cesium-137, strontium-90, and iodine-131 that were persisting, excuse me, over 2 weeks and up to 30 kilometers offshore. The Japanese government now has only monitored 5 to 8 of these radioisotopes in the wastewater, but there are many more present in the tanks of wastewater, and they are not being monitored. The Japanese government has really many alternatives to releasing the stored water into the Pacific Ocean. They assert that they have removed the cesium, strontium, and other long half-life radioactive elements in the water, but they could not remove or did not remove carbon-14 or tritium due to technical difficulty and cost, apparently. We know that exposure to low levels of radiation can cause an increased rates of cancer in populations. And we believe there may be a variability and susceptibility to the genetic damage that's caused from low-level radiation. This is based on our own genetics, our age, and other radiation exposures in the past, such as medical X-rays or airline travel. We do know that there was a significant increase in thyroid cancer in exposed younger people after the Chernobyl nuclear power plant disaster. We know that younger people are more susceptible to low-level radiation exposure. Several studies have shown increases in cardiovascular disease, like heart attack and stroke, as well as cancer after decades of low-level radiation exposure to people. So this is the concern about the lack of knowledge in the Japanese plan to release radioactive water over the course of 30 years. But even if we assume TEPCO and the IAEA conclusions that the risks are very low, we know that low risks can still result in significant numbers. For example, an increase in cancer risk of 1% in a population of 100 million people would still result in 10,000 more cancers. As a doctor, we're taught to be sensitive to the dose of radiation we are causing patients when we order certain x-rays. So we're taught to think about this carefully when we order CAT scans and other scans with isotopes that are used to help people see specialized tissues, and not do it if there's alternatives. So I am not a geophysicist or a radiation biologist, but as an advocate against nuclear weapons, I do read with great interest what the world scientific community publishes. And one scientist that I've read quite a bit is Ken Boosler from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute and the director of the Center for Marine and Environmental Radioactivity, who has been that director for 10 years. He was also part of the scientific expedition that studied in Fukushima shortly after the disaster. He has stated that there has not been enough study of the stored water due to the wide variability of measurement between the tanks. Not all tanks have been sampled. I believe only 40% of the tanks have been sampled. He believes this is not enough data, there's not enough data shared to judge the amount of dilution necessary either when the water is released. In his opinion, it should be diluted 2.5 times more than what is planned. Other issues are that TEPCO did not measure organically bound tritium, only the only the inorganic form of tritium. But the organic form is known to be more harmful to human health. Dr. Buesler also said that they have not yet demonstrated that they can actually bring the concentration down to regulatory levels. So all of this information convinced me that this is a long-term issue that's being rushed. He recommended indefinitely postponing the release and pursuing other options, and I agree. We could learn from more thorough study prior to restarting the release. In fact, if the release was delayed for longer time, that would help to decrease the radioactive level in the waste. So that's the case from my point of view. Thank you. I appreciate you inviting me to the conference.
Thank you very much. So what cannot be treated should be prevented, and that was impressive. And long-term evaluation of the impact has not been conducted, and we did not have enough data and researchers. Then why should accept this decision? And we should reconsider what's been going on. And what I'm impressed is about the talk about the tritium. And he mentioned that the risk of the tritium combination is a very serious issue. So that is an important point. And if you have, the panelists would have time, so if you would talk about the response from the people from Japan, that would be better. Now we will invite Mr. Choi Gang-chul, and he will talk about the country's situation in response to the nuclear waste. Please go ahead. You have the floor.
Let me unmute first. Hi, everyone. This is Casey Choi, President of KPAC, Korean American Public Action Committee, advocating peace and prosperity on the Korean Peninsula. It's my great honor to join this timely, important international conference with the honorable panels and National Assembly members of the Republic of Korea, discussing the unprecedented discharge of Fukushima nuclear wastewater into the most valuable shared asset for all human beings on the planet, the Pacific Ocean. For my turn, I'll briefly explain the U.S. reaction and situation on this issue. Until the beginning of discharge on August 21st, U.S. mainstream media outlet has reported very infrequently, and did not show much interest and attention. But after Japanese government began to discharge, followed by China imposed a strong sanction, strong ban on Japanese seafood import, followed by furious protests in South Korea and neighboring country. The press release has been increased a little bit more. However, as you know, Secretary of State Tony Blinken on August 15 and State Department on August 24th announced their strong support for the Japanese government decision to release the wastewater. On August 31st, U.S. Ambassador to Japan visited Fukushima site, held a testing ceremony show, which I thought was very shameful. In reality, due to the lack of enough media and enough information, general public in U.S. could not have much attention and interest. But there have been growing concerns and anger, anxiety among the Korean American community. On May 31st, KPAC issued a special statement of condemnation, and June 25th, the Federation, a coalition of Korean American diaspora organizations, held a huge scale, around 200 people gathered together in front of the UN headquarters, Manhattan, New York, and issued and delivered a special statement to the Japanese consulate as well as the UN offices. The Korean American community protests and rallies has been spreading to major cities in the US as well as overseas in Europe and Australia. This is a statement from KPAC on May 31st, demanding three governments, Japanese government, Korean government, and US government to stop and work with the international, accordance with the international law, and work the international community to stop and pressure Japanese government not to release the contaminated water. I'm gonna show you some protest photos in the US and overseas, because there are no representatives from Europe and Australia. I'm gonna show you some photos. This rally was in front of a UN headquarters, Manhattan, New York. And this is also Manhattan, downtown New York, Manhattan, in front of Japanese mission. This is at the White House, Washington, D.C., in front of Japanese consulate, Seattle, Washington. You can see, Dr. Buxton's photo here, voicing up in front of the crowd. Thank you so much, Dr. Buxton, for your cooperation, support. In Los Angeles, there are big rallies and protests continuing in front of the Japanese consulate, and some protesters they started to do in beach area. They want to raise some awareness in beach cities in California, Oregon, and Washington. That's a good idea. Toronto, Canada, they have been doing very big rallies a lot of times. Zurich, Switzerland. Berlin, Germany, Hamburg, Germany, Frankfurt, Germany, Sydney, Australia, Melbourne, Australia, Wellington, New Zealand, and so on. I really appreciate all the hard work and tireless leadership and dedication from all the Korean American community, as well as local environmental activists for these important, sensitive issues. I have really important news for you. Unlike Biden administration, who officially support Japanese discharge of nuclear wastewater, there are meaningful response from two states, New York State and Massachusetts. New York Governor Casey Hochul signed a bill which is called Save the Hudson to stop radioactive waste dumping into Hudson River. This is very much significant, actually, bill. On August 18, very recent event. July 24th, state of Massachusetts rejected a request by a company who are supposed to dismantle Charlotte nuclear plant to discharge radioactive water into the Card Bay. They blocked their trial. This can be significant backbone for our movement. So I really want some experts and some leaders of the Democratic Party to immediately meet the personnel of two states. Thanks to the strong leadership and advocacy, some California cities started to acknowledge the risk of discharge of radioactive wastewater in the Pacific Ocean. The mayor of the city of Fullerton and pro tem mayor of the city of Irvine announced 2-3 days ago a special statement for their residents who can be affected by the release of nuclear contaminated water. This is a statement from the city of Irvine, one of the beautiful city in the nation, and city of Fullerton, also one of the nicest community in Southern California, Orange County. They have really meaningful statement on their announcement. And efforts are on the way to spread the awareness and sympathy to U.S. Congress. I know even though some lawmakers such as Brad Sherman, Andy Kim, Marilyn Strickland, who have been the champion and advocate for the peace on the Korean Peninsula issues, they personally opposed the discharge and then expressed their opinion that other methods such as steam evaporation should be considered. The basic lack of enough attention from the mainstream media and the supporting announcement by the Biden administration have made them very difficult to raise their voice and very actively act on these issues. However, despite the difficulties, Korean American communities and environmental activists like Dr. Bergson are continuing to provide the right information and raise awareness of environmental problem and impacts on American people's health, safety, and related industry through meetings and a special letter to U.S. Congress. This is the last slide. I know this is not gonna be a short-term battle. This is gonna be a long-term fight, but we cannot give up. We need to more actively communicate and educate the city and state and federal levels of leaders. So we should continue to hold the protests in front of Japanese missions, as well as city, state government, and legislature buildings, White House, Congress, to draw more attention and media exposure. And we should make it an imminent issue for all the American citizens. I think this idea can be discussed a little bit later, but we should also consider filing lawsuit in the US for legal compensation against the Japanese government to press Japanese government to choose other alternatives other than just discharging the water into the ocean. There are plenty of other alternatives. So as I said, lastly, I want to emphasize somebody should immediately contact the personnel of the state of New York and Massachusetts. They can be our logic, our rationale, and our backbone of this movement. That's it. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much for your comments and presentation. He introduced several the news articles in the U.S. and then he mentioned the growing attention to this on this matter.
And he also mentioned a lot of activities conducted by the Korean Americans, and also the civil society in the U.S. is taking action. And finally, the state of Massachusetts and New York would be the candidates that we can contact to forge solidarity. And the representative, the lawmaker Merrick Strickland and Andy Kim and other congressmen acknowledged the need for finding alternatives instead of discharge of the contaminated water. And this is the last panelist, and thank you for waiting.
Professor Jang Woo-lee at Songyunga University is going to introduce the current responses from China on this matter.
Okay. Great thanks for the invitation from from the Topolom in Judah. And I'm a Chinese citizen, but I'm currently working and teaching in the Songyunga University of South Korea. So let me begin by sharing my presentation files. So I think today I'm going to briefly introduce that, how Chinese government has responded to Japan's release of the Fukushima nuclear contaminated water since the end of this August. And I think, first of all, just by seeing, by looking at this terminology, I think it already conveys the clear message of Chinese government's attitudes. Because I have also noticed that the news that in Korea, the current government is trying or is considering to revise, to change the word from the nuclear contaminated water to the treated water. But in China, the Chinese government has been always using the concept or the terminology of the so-called nuclear contaminated water. And actually, I have actually selected it part of the official expression from the Chinese government and also from the Chinese Foreign Ministry. I think those, I'm trying to cite those expressions, and I think it will help to understand the official grounds and policy responses from the China side. So first, on July the 4th, and there has been a press conference which had been attended by the Chinese ambassador in Japan. And also it's important to note that the July the 4th was exactly the date that the IAEA released the reports on the Japan's release of the wastewater. So let me read part of it. So Ambassador Wu mentioned that the release of the nuclear contaminated water to the sea is unjustified. But Japan has not fully consulted with the neighboring countries and parties and made the decision unilaterally. So the release to the sea is not the safest option. And regarding the technical and the scientific wise, so he also mentioned that the technological effectiveness and the maturity of the ALPS system remains untested and has not been acknowledged by any other third-party organization. And also regarding the IAEA report, so Ambassador Wu mentioned that the IAEA's report is not a path for Japan's release of the nuclear contaminated water. And he also stated that the IAEA is an international organization that facilitates safe, reliable, and peaceful use of the nuclear technology, but IAEA is not an appropriate agency for assessing the nuclear contaminated water pollution to the maritime environment. And also, 1 month later, on October 22, so if you see the picture, this was the spokesperson of Chinese Foreign Ministry, Mr. Wang Wenbin. So in the press conference, he mentioned, and he also clearly stated that if the Fukushima nuclear contaminated water is truly safe, then Japan wouldn't have to dump it into the sea, and certainly shouldn't if it is not safe. So here there are the three keywords which it's important to be noted. So that he was using unjustified, unreasonable, and unnecessary. Okay, so for those reasons, he stated that China strongly urges Japan to stop its wrongdoing and cancel the ocean discharge plan, and also communicate with neighboring countries with sincerity and goodwill. Okay? And also, 2 days later, exactly on the day of Japan's start of releasing the wastewater, so in the press conference, when answering the questions raised by the Bloomberg News and also Japan's Asahi Shimbun, so the spokesperson of Chinese Foreign Ministry re-emphasized that the disposal of Fukushima's nuclear contaminated water is not a private matter for Japan. So since the human being began using the nuclear energy, so there has been neither any precedent nor universally recognized standards for discharging this water. And also regarding the IAEA report, so the Chinese government clearly stated that the IAEA Director General also mentioned that the report is neither a recommendation nor an endorsement for Japan's ocean discharge policy. So finally, I think that the third paragraph, can try to summarize the Chinese policy responses in the best way. That the Japanese government failed to prove the legitimacy and the legality of the ocean discharge decision. I wouldn't read it all, but you can see how China has responded to the Japan's policy choice. So if I try to summarize in my own words regarding to how China has responded to this issue, I think China has basically condemned and opposed Japanese decision in 3 dimensions for 3 reasons. So first, China believes that Japan's release of the water has not been tested in scientific or technological dimensions or perspectives. The second, regarding to the IAEA report, I think the Chinese does not really question the IAEA's report itself, but instead China argued that the IAEA should not be the only organization or international organization that has been involved or invited to join this international monitoring. And the third, China also questions the procedures which Japan dealt with this issue, because China argued that at least there should be more neighboring countries who get involved into the dialogues and interactions with Japan. But so far, Japan has not done so in a responsible way. So anyway, I think after summarizing these 3 points, I think basically China's response shares many similarities with the stances of the Topolobamjudan. And the second part is that, before I start with my suggestions, I think also there's the need to see how China has really responded. As we have already witnessed, so China declared the ban on the Japanese export of the seafood, so exactly since the day of October 24. And also in the same time, so Hong Kong and Macau also announced a ban. It's actually a partial ban. It's not a full ban, but it's a partial ban on the seafood import produced by part of Japan's coastal prefectures. Okay. So the second part, I would like to just briefly mention some of my brief ideas. So I think there's also the pressing needs for the neighboring countries to work together, to join hands and work together to deal with this issue against Japan, especially between China and South Korea. And the reason why this is important was because, there has been the news and there has been the signs that there could be potentially a China, Japan, South Korea trilateral summit at the end of this year. As we know that this summit has been suspended for more than, it's almost 4 years. So it was lastly convened at the end of the 2019. So because of the COVID-19, it has been suspended for 4 years. So now we need to create and build, a politically and diplomatically good environment for the summits. And so that's why we need to join hands to solve this issue in a timely manner. And especially, I hope I think Korea should take certain initiative, because anyway, Korea is the chair country for this year's trilateral summit among Korea, Japan, and China. And also, some of my ideas are, if the three countries, China, Japan, and Korea, and also other East Asian states, if we are going to join hands together, and why don't we make use of the existing cooperation mechanisms? So as far as I know, among China, Japan, and Korea, there are already the TRM, we call it the TRM. So the full name is Top Regulators Meeting on Nuclear Safety, and participated by the three countries' agency, Environmental Agency and the Nuclear Safety Agency. But unfortunately, also, this mechanism has been suspended, has been interrupted for more than 4 years. So why don't we make use of this existing mechanism, resume the mechanisms, and facilitate the international dialogue using this platform? And finally, among the three countries, there has been also the existing and the well-developed tripartite environmental ministers meeting, the TEMM. As far as I know, there has been a lot of sub-mechanisms under the banner of TEMM. For example, there has been the dialogues on the climate change, air quality, biodiversity, and so on and so forth. But so far, it seems that there's no mechanisms discussing and addressing the maritime environment and joint monitorings. So I think for these reasons, we need to take the chance and create more platforms for international dialogues to jointly solve and find the solution for these issues. Well, this is my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. He summarized the official responses from the Chinese government, and the statements from the Chinese government actually condemned the movement and actions by the Japanese government. And he also mentioned about the IAEA report. IAEA did not officially support the decision of the Japanese government. And then he also mentioned the possible alternatives with his own ideas, mainly 3 points. In the tripartite summit, China, Japan, Korea trilateral summit, we can mention this issue as a main agenda. And then there are other mechanisms such as top regulators meetings on nuclear safety TRM and TEMM. These meetings can be used to facilitate communications among the three countries. So we have listened to the presentations by the three speakers. So I think it's time to gather our ideas. Regarding this matter, we agree on the importance of this matter.
In order to take joint action, we need to think concrete measures. So to that end, we need more discussion. The current issue that the contaminated water is being released, that all panelists share the idea that it should be stopped. And I think that we made a consensus about the need for stopping the dumping of contaminated water. And for that matter, we need to work together and form solidarity. And there are more detailed measures that have been suggested. And regarding those measures, if you think one of those are more feasible, or if you want to supplement more or add your idea, then I would like to listen to you. So let me first brief on the 5 panelists' discussions. So, Mr. Lee, if you would like to add your thoughts on this for the panel's discussion, if you have, please go ahead. And thank you for the comments from the 4 panelists. Regarding the Japanese government's stance and the atmosphere in Japan, regarding the international criticism, I don't think they will stop voluntarily discharging the contaminated water. So to stop dumping of the contaminated water, we need to take an action at the international level. So I think we can think of 3 levels. First, the London Convention General Plenary Session will be held in October, and this issue has been suggested as one of the agenda at the order of the 14th item. So if we discuss at the time, then we can lead those momentum to taking an international action. Now, the focus is whether that is the contaminated water being discharged to the ocean. It is rather the fundamental problem whether it is the discharge from the land or from released to the land or released to the water. And they said that some people argued that this is not a discharge from the land to the ocean. This is a very fundamental issue. So we need to let the international community know clear facts so that the countries who are participating in that General Assembly should know the facts. And that is the first thing that we need to do. And the second is to submit the motion to the Committee on Human Rights. The private sector can raise an issue, but the decisions making would be the states, countries. So in that sense, the countries to the London Convention plenary session should be where the government representatives to promote our idea. And another thing is that the submitting a file to the UN Committee on Human Rights, I think that is also significant. So you are here, the Professor Chang, who is the professor of Sangkyungan University. I don't know how the people on the ground is communicating, and China is the country that takes the strongest measure, and the other countries in the Pacific Ocean, like Solomon, is also expressing strong opposition to the discharge of the contaminated water. And if the Chinese government would have think about talking about this issue at the London Convention plenary session, or the Chinese government may file a motion to the International Tribunal for the Law of Sea. So if you have more the idea about the stance from the Chinese government, then if you will share it with us, that would be helpful. Professor Chang, do you have any comment on this?
Thank you. So as far as I know, Chinese government has shown its stance that the Japanese release of the nuclear contaminated water was an action that against the international law and the convention. But I do not yet see any sign for the Chinese government to be openly play some kind of definite roles in the London Convention, which was supposed to be convened in the early October. I think so far there has been not yet an open news or open information regarding what you have mentioned.
네.
Thank you very much. Okay, you already mentioned it is a violation of the international law and it is violation of the London Convention. However, and the government has not mentioned about the legal action against Japan yet.
또 다른 서로 간에 좀 확인할 것이라든지.
So is there any other, if you have any suggestions, you may share your suggestions as well. And Mr. Matsugubo Hazime, he shared his data, very technical data. Thank you very much for sharing that information. And please introduce the Japan Nuclear Energy Data Information Office. And as far as I know, it is a big think tank, a civic group. How you work with the general public for your campaign? Can you please introduce your movement? Thank you very much for your question. The ARPA-treated wastewater out of the Fukushima power plant. Regarding this matter, the civic groups, many civil society, they are strongly opposed to the decision made by the Japanese government. But according to a most recent survey, a large number of people, Japanese people, they agree to the decision. So when the discharge of wastewater was decided near the Fukushima power plant and the headquarters of TEPCO and National Assembly, and before these places, we witnessed some protests against the decision made by the Japanese government. I also joined the protests, and we try our best to raise awareness on this matter. However, the Japanese government and TEPCO, they have huge budgets to raise campaigns in favor of their decisions. That is very sad news. But thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share this information with you. Japanese people, Japanese society. Well, while the Japanese government is trying to provide some science-based information, Japanese people and the Japanese civil society, they cannot fully understand the stance of the Japanese government. So the situation is bad, actually bad in Japan. This is our challenge to resolve. Yes, this matter will have a harmful influence on the East Asian peace. Thank you very much for introducing what kind of campaigns have been made in Japan.
행동에 대해서 외국에서 비과학적인 그러한 이 설명 또는 논리를 가지고
So,
이런 인식이 보내서
and still, but however, among the general public in Japan, there are some arguments regarding the science-based data.
국가에서 이 평화를 위해서 대단히 좋지 않은
And this is not a good move. I mean, in consideration of the peace in the Northeast Asia. He mentioned about that. Thank you very much.
어제 그제인가요? 일본 안에서 굉장히
About 2 days ago, there was a big protest among the civic groups against the decision by the Japanese government, as far as I know.
이런 것들이 정리된 게 나온 것이 있는지
Do you have some further information about the
확인해서
protest?
말씀을 해주시면 좋을 것 같습니다.
If you have, can you provide more information about a recent huge protest against the decision by the Japanese government?
私もその集会参加していたんですけれども、
I also joined the protests, actually, to stop dumping of the ocean waste. And then, actually, our opinion, our argument to stop the dumping of the ocean waste, the waste into the ocean was adopted. And a huge protest took place in Japan, and there was a big argument against the dumping. Thank you very much.
방출에 대해서 반대한다는
And yes, there was a huge protest and opposition against the dumping of the wastewater into the ocean. And you also mentioned that there will be another round of protest in Tokyo. Thank you.
Then what's the response of the American citizens in the U.S.? Will you add more comment on it, Mr. Buxton? In person,
Unfortunately, I think the public is not that aware. And we in the United States are kind of up against the military-industrial complex. They often are shielding information from the public. For example, in the case of nuclear weapons, there was a huge effort to hide this from the American people historically. And I fear that they are just in lockstep with the nuclear power movement in the United States, which is very defensive right now. So I think it's going to be hard to get a movement going here. I was very excited to hear that Marilyn Strickland, who's a representative in Congress in our state, is opposing this. And she's a fairly conservative Democrat in the Democratic Party, but it gives our organization an opening to talk to her, because she actually has not wanted to talk to us up till now. So I've written that down, and we will pursue that as our organization, because we have an in being Washington citizens, and we have some of our members of our organizations that are in her district. So she really should meet with us. So that's my plan. It's small, but that's what we can do.
thank you very much. Mr. Buxton and some American citizens are now beginning to pay attention to this issue, so they will approach to them and they will take action, and there was some actions that has been taken. So now, is there anyone who can discuss in detail or suggest your idea? Representative Song, you have the floor.
I have some questions. Information exchange and information sharing. Yes, this is critical. I absolutely agree with that.
상황에 대해서
First,
가장 궁금한
okay, my question goes to China first.
IAEA의 comprehensive report
IAEA's comprehensive report. Okay, you also mentioned that IAEA's report is not a green signal. It's not a signal of pass to the Japanese issue.
정부 차원
My question is,
이에 대한 분석 평가 보고서
is there any kind of analysis report on the IAEA's comprehensive report? Any analysis data
확인해 주실 수 있으면 감사하겠습니다.
made by the Japanese government?
그리고
So this is my question. And my another question goes to Mr. Hajime.
아까 이제 이번 오염수 방출 말고 이미 기존에
Not just the dumping of wastewater this time.
오염수가 유출되고 있다라는 굉장히 중요한 말씀을
You mentioned, you provide information. The wastewater has been discharged.
라든지 IAEA 보고서를
It
보면
was discharged even before the decision of discharge the wastewater into the ocean.
적극적으로 잘 해오고 있다라는 표현들이 꽤 많거든요.
And then
이렇게 본다면 이미
regarding the monitoring,
이번 오염수 방출 말고
not
기존에
the dumping of wastewater into the ocean this time. In the past, the wastewater had been discharged into the ocean. So such kind of information was had been shared with the general public in a transparent manner. If that was not the case,
그렇게 보고서에 현재 후쿠시마 바다에 대한 모니터가 잘 되고 있다 이렇게 할 수 있는 것인지.
then if that was not the case, TEPCO or the TEPCO can mention about how TEPCO can react to, about how TEPCO can respond to this matter, the monitoring of the wastewater dumping.
I am representing Seochogu. My name is Choi Eun-sang. So following up that question, this week, the Japanese fisher filed a motion to the Japanese court to discharge the contaminated water, and the Japanese government followed the court in Japan. And this filing is critical, I think. When the domestic court decides that the discharge should be stopped, then the government should stop. So we need to pay attention to how it proceeds. And this is rather an opinion than a question. Last week, I am a member of the Foreign Affairs and Unification Committee, and last week had a assessment of the accounting of the last year's budget, and the deputy minister attended the meeting, and he said that the previous administration raised an issue, and then whether a question was asked if that procedure would continue, and the deputy minister said that the ministry will follow the suit. But then in the following occasion, the vice deputy minister changed its words, and then in the next venue, if without any valid ground, the scientific ground, if we keep suggesting or proposing or asking that stopping the discharge, then would be humiliated in the international arena. So the current administration seems not knowing what to do, and they have no discernment of the important 3 international conventions. And the foreign minister seems like the important matters have not been reported to the minister. So regarding the raising our voices at the London Convention, I am skeptical of the current administration will raise the strong voice at the venue unless Chinese government and the government in the Pacific Oceans take action I don't have any expectation from the current administration of Korea, and the Democratic Party of Korea will go to Japan next week to discuss the representatives in Japan, and that meeting will be joined by the ruling party and opposition party. So the item of discussing the discharge of the contaminated water has not been included in the agenda. So we have arranged a separate venue to find a opportunity to forge a solidarity with the citizens in Japan. The discharging of contaminated water is also the risk to the Japanese people. So we need to let others know that we need to also collaborate with the Japanese people because it is also their issue. And next time we will also meet the people in the U.S. So at that time we will promote our agenda there to the American people. And Mr. Che and the Representative Kim and Representative Choi had shared their thoughts and made a comment rather than asking a question. And that there was also some little bit curiosity about the situation in Japan. So I will ask 3 questions to panelists. So in China, Representative Song asked this question regarding the comprehensive report of IAEA. At the government level or the science community, were there any scientific report on this issue in China? The second question is the Japanese citizens should have learned that contaminated water has been already discharged, and how much information do the Japanese citizens have regarding this issue? And the next question from the Representative Choi is that the Japanese people also file a motion at the Japanese court to suspend the discharging of the contaminated water, and we pay attention to how this motion will proceed, and he wanted to listen more about the current situation. So Professor Chang, you have the floor. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you for the first question. I think, first of all, regarding the IEA report, I have introduced in my presentation that China does not necessarily question the report of the IAEA, but China mentions that the IAEA should not be the only or unique international organization that has been involved in this process. And China argues that the IAEA is, convincing. It's more convincing in terms of the peaceful use of nuclear energy, but in terms of the maritime pollution and environment, it's necessary to invite more neutral international organizations and societies. And so far, I haven't noticed any scientific reports from the China side regarding this issue. And also the Chinese government also stated it that we don't know the future. We cannot know the future. What kind of the impacts or outcomes would be generated, we don't know yet. We have so many uncertainties in the future, but so far I haven't seen any fixed scientific reports from the China side regarding the release of the nuclear contaminated water. But maybe there's a possibility that more scientific research and reports will be followed in the coming days. Thank you.
So Chinese government mentioned that we cannot make sure about the future, and that currently the analysis has not been made yet. But in the future down the road, the scientific analysis can be made. Thank you. And okay, 2 questions to Japanese speaker, Mr. Hajime.
The Japanese civil society has their understanding about the discharge of the contaminated water. As I said earlier, the Japanese government seems to demonstrate that the contaminated water is only released from the Fukushima, and the Japanese citizens do not have full explanation from the Japanese government. And this means that the Japanese government provides a only partial explanation of the whole landscape. So we need to take a close look at the total amount of the contaminated water discharge. So regarding the IAEA report, it is about the evaluation of the discharge of the contaminated water. It is not the assessment of the entire impact of the discharge of the entire amount of the contaminated water. And the Japanese fishers filed a motion at the Japanese court. So I am also with the party to the filing a motion. And the Japanese government has always said that they will discharge the contaminated water without harming the interest of the fishers. And the Japanese government say that they got some level of agreement from the fishers not to hurt their interest, but still the Japanese fishers are not fully satisfied with the current Japanese government. So that is why they filed the motion to the court. So the civil society in Japan is making effort to provide the support for the filing a motion to the Japanese court.
Thank you very much for your answers. We have the foreign panelists, and then we have Mr. Lee Yong-sun. Thank you very much for being here. Despite your busy schedule. And thank you very much for providing summarized information and comments. As we are running out of time, it is time to conclude today's conference. As mentioned at the beginning of this conference is not our last, but the first step toward a joint movement. So, down the road, we would like to expand the communications through this kind of conference. And then that way, we will be able to announce a joint statement. And we have drafted the joint resolution already. And then we will be able to reflect our ideas and comments to this joint resolution later on down the road. This is brief information of the joint resolution. Starting August 24th, 2023, the Japanese government started dumping nuclear wastewater into the sea, disregarding deep concerns and dangers expressed by the world prior. So, we have requested the stopping of the dumping of the wastewater, and then we pursue a joint responses to this matter. The conference has decided on the following international actions. First, Fukushima nuclear wastewater dumping is a global problem, and to fix this, we are brainstorming various alternative solutions than dumping to persuade the Japanese government and urging appropriate international efforts. Additionally, we will continue efforts within our respective countries to stop this dumping. Second, specifically at October 4th, 2023, 45th London Convention and 18th London Protocol General Assembly, Fukushima wastewater dumping, London Convention, and violation of protocol, we will act together. If needed, we consider filing complaints at the UN Commission on Human Rights or International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea. Third, this conference, as the starting point, we will continue to work and expand efforts to stop this dumping of wastewater. This is a joint resolution, a draft version of the joint resolution.
So under the name of the International Conference on Stopping Dumping of Fukushima Nuclear Wastewater, we suggest this joint resolution. So what do you think? Do you support the making this resolution? Thank you very much. Seems I found that you all agree to this. I appreciate your attendance. We will hold another meeting next time. So if possible, I would like to see you in person. Once again, I thank you very much for your attendance. I declare this conference closed. Thank you.